When my husband walked out and my own brother told me I'd never make it as a single mom, I believed them. Until I bought a mansion bigger than any of them ever dreamed of. Now they're all showing up at my door, pretending they care. My name is Rowan Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, and for the last 7 years, it's just been me and my daughter, Lila. She's 7 now, sweet, funny, and a lot braver than I ever was. Looking at her now, running down the marble hallway of the house they all said I'd never have, I still can't believe we made it here. There was a time when I couldn't even afford a box of cereal without counting coins. Back then, Dean, my ex-husband, told me he needed space. What he really needed was a new life with someone else. My brother Caleb called to tell me I should have seen it coming. He said, "You've always been too soft, Ro. You can't raise a kid alone." His words stuck to me like glue. I cried that night while Lila slept beside me, her tiny hand on my arm, trusting me completely. Dean's parents stopped calling soon after. They said it was too hard to see their son's mistakes, but I knew the truth. They didn't want to help. They chose their comfort over me and Lila. It felt like every door slammed at once. There were mornings when I'd wake up before sunrise, look at Lila still asleep, and wonder how I'd feed us that week. But then she'd open her eyes and smile, and I'd push myself out of bed because she believed I could do anything. Her belief was heavier than any insult, stronger than any fear. Now, when I walk through this house, I remember the woman I used to be, the one who begged Dean not to leave, who believed Caleb when he said I couldn't survive on my own. I don't hate them anymore. But when they knock on my door, pretending to care, I see right through it. I worked for everything they thought I'd lose. Every corner of this home carries a memory of struggle, of nights I stayed awake fixing, cleaning, learning. I didn't just rebuild a life. I built a future for Lila, a safe place no one can take from us. They tried to break me, but they only taught me how to stand. When I think back to the early years of my marriage, it almost feels like another lifetime. Dean and I were young and stupidly hopeful. We rented a small house with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but I didn't care. We laughed a lot back then, stayed up late making plans about the future. When Lila was born, everything felt perfect. Dean's parents, Elaine and Victor, couldn't get enough of her. They called her their little sunshine, always bringing over toys and blankets she didn't need but loved anyway. For a while, I really believed I had a family that would stand by me through anything. Elaine would stop by just to hold Lila so I could nap, and Victor always bragged about me, telling people I was the smartest daughter-in-law anyone could ask for. My brother Caleb came around often too. He'd bring pizza, play with Lila, and talk to Dean about sports. Our home was noisy, full of people and laughter. I remember looking around one night, thinking, this is what happiness looks like. But happiness has a way of vanishing quietly. It doesn't explode or make a scene. It just fades. The first change came when I lost my job at the marketing firm. The company downsized, and I was one of the first to go. I tried to stay calm, told Dean it would be fine, that I'd find something soon. But I saw something shift in his face, like he suddenly saw me as a problem instead of a partner. Bills started piling up, and the tension in the house grew thicker. Dean stopped coming home for dinner, saying he was working late. Elaine began making small comments, nothing cruel at first, but sharp enough to sting. She'd look at me and say, "Maybe if you spent less time worrying and more time supporting Dean, things wouldn't be so stressful." I bit my tongue, tried to stay polite, but those words stayed with me. Victor stayed friendly, though quieter now. He'd still play with Lila, still call her his little sunshine. But when Elaine complained about me, he didn't say a word. Silence hurts just as much as insults sometimes. Then there was Caleb, my brother. I thought he'd always have my back, but when Dean started pulling away, Caleb started taking his side. He said I was too emotional, that I made everything dramatic. It felt like being erased piece by piece. The house that once felt warm now felt heavy. Conversations turned short, dinners went quiet, and Lila, just a little girl, started asking why Daddy didn't laugh anymore. I told her he was tired from work. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. That love in this family was starting to dry up, and I was the only one still fighting to keep it alive. It happened on a Tuesday night, one of those evenings that started off completely normal. I was folding laundry while dinner cooked, Lila sitting on the floor coloring at the coffee table. Dean's phone buzzed over and over again. I didn't mean to check it, but after the 10th time, I did. The message that flashed across the screen made my heart stop. It was from Marissa, my friend, the woman I used to eat lunch with at work, the one who told me she'd always have my back. The words were short but enough to burn themselves into my mind. I miss last night already. I remember just standing there, frozen, the smell of pasta burning behind me. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. When Dean walked in a few minutes later, all I could manage was, "How long?" He didn't even look surprised. He just sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "You were going to find out eventually." I felt something break inside me. 7 years of marriage, just gone like it was nothing. I started shouting, asking how he could do this to me, to our daughter. Lila came running from her room, scared, crying, "Mommy, Daddy, stop. Is Daddy leaving forever?" Her little voice made the room go silent. Dean looked at her, then at me, and he didn't even try to deny it. He packed a bag that night. I followed him into the hallway, begging him to at least talk to me, to think about Lila. He told me he needed space, and that Marissa understands him. I'll never forget how calm he sounded. Like leaving was just another chore on his list. When I realized what he'd taken with him, the calm inside me vanished. Most of our savings were gone, every dollar we'd worked for. I felt dizzy. I called Elaine, hoping she'd talk sense into him, but she just sighed and said, "Rowan, you need help. You've been unstable for months. Dean needs to think about Lila's best interests." Her words sliced through me. I hung up before I started crying again. Then Caleb called. My own brother. I thought maybe he'd finally take my side, but instead, he told me I was being dramatic, that I drove Dean away, with my stress and worry. I didn't even have the strength to argue. By the time the sun came up, the house felt hollow. Dean's clothes were gone, the bed was half empty, and Lila slept beside me clutching her stuffed rabbit. I watched her breathe and promised myself one thing. No matter what it took, I would never let her feel like this again. I had a few $100s left and no idea where we'd go, but I knew we couldn't stay. The life I had was over, and I had to start from nothing, with only my daughter's tiny hand to hold. The apartment was smaller than any place I had ever lived. 1 bedroom, a kitchen that barely fit a stove, and windows that wouldn't close all the way. But it was ours. After everything that had happened, that tiny space felt like a small piece of safety. The first night we moved in, we sat on the floor eating noodles out of paper bowls because we didn't have a table yet. Lila thought it was fun. She called it our picnic night. I smiled for her, even though I wanted to cry. There were nights when the power got cut off because I couldn't pay the bill on time. We'd light a few candles, and Lila would say the flickering shadows looked like dancing stars. I'd tell her stories while she drew pictures with her crayons. Pictures of a big house with tall windows, a garden, and a dog. She'd hand me her drawings and say, "This is the house we'll have someday, Mommy." I'd nod and tell her it was beautiful. Deep down, I wanted to believe her more than she knew. Days were long. I found a job as a receptionist at a small auto shop. The pay wasn't great, but it covered food and part of the rent. After my shift ended, I'd rush home, make dinner, and tuck Lila into bed. She'd fall asleep quickly, her little arms wrapped around that same stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. I'd sit beside her for a minute, just watching her breathe, then quietly grab my cleaning supplies and head out again. My second job was cleaning vacation homes. I worked until midnight most nights. The first few weeks nearly broke me. My hands were raw from scrubbing, my back hurt constantly, and I barely slept. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd remember Lila's words, "Mommy always finds a way." She said it one morning when we didn't have milk for her cereal. I was about to apologize, but she smiled and said, "It's okay, Mommy. You always fix things." That tiny sentence stayed in my heart. I started learning how to stretch every dollar, how to cook meals that lasted for days, how to hide my exhaustion so Lila wouldn't worry. Sometimes, when I came home late, I'd find she'd left a note for me in her uneven handwriting. "Good job, Mommy." Those notes became my strength. The apartment was cramped, noisy, and sometimes cold, but it was filled with love. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Every day felt like a fight, but when I looked at Lila's smiling face, it didn't matter. She believed in me completely, and that belief was enough to keep me going, one long night at a time. I was walking past the lake houses when I overheard 2 people talking about flipping homes. They were excitedly discussing buying old houses, fixing them up, and selling them for more money. I couldn't stop listening. That night, my mind kept spinning with ideas. I spent hours online, watching videos that explained how to buy and renovate houses. I signed up for free workshops and read cheap books from the library, trying to soak up every tip I could find. After weeks of learning, I decided to take a risk. I found a tiny cottage that had been abandoned for years. It was small, run down, and full of problems, but I could see the potential. When I told Caleb about it, he laughed, and Dean made jokes, saying I would never pull it off. Even Elaine raised her eyebrows and said, "A house flipper? With a kid?" I felt nervous, but I didn't let their words stop me. I knew I had to try. I got to work with Lila's help. We spent hours painting the walls, often making a mess and laughing as we went. Lila gave each room a special name. One wall became the Princess Castle, and another corner was the Unicorn Room. Seeing the cottage slowly come alive with color and care made me feel proud. It was tiring, and there were moments when I wondered if I had made a mistake, but I kept going, determined to finish what I had started. Finally, the day came when the cottage was ready to sell. I listed it and waited, my heart pounding. When an offer came in, it was more than 3 times what I had paid for the house. I couldn't believe it. Overwhelmed with happiness, I grabbed Lila's hand, and we ran into the empty living room. We danced barefoot, spinning and laughing until we cried, exhausted but full of joy. The cottage that had seemed like a hopeless project had turned into a triumph, proof that taking risks and believing in myself could lead to amazing results. I realized that this first brick, this first home, was more than just a house. It was a symbol of courage, hard work, and the start of something new. Lila and I sat on the floor afterward, surrounded by the quiet rooms, feeling proud and unstoppable. This was the beginning of a journey that would change our lives forever. This first flip had taught me that dreams could be built from small steps, and sometimes taking a risk was the very first brick in building a brighter future. Years passed, and I worked harder than ever. My small business slowly grew into something bigger. I flipped houses, staged them beautifully, and sold them for more than I ever imagined. Every deal, every renovation, every late night added a little more to my savings. I kept careful track of everything, and I never stopped dreaming. Lila's drawings of our dream mansion were always on the fridge. Every time I saw them, I remembered why I was working so hard and what I wanted for both of us. Buying a mansion seemed impossible for a long time. But I kept going, taking small steps, learning from every house I flipped, and saving every penny I could. There were moments when it felt too far away, but I never let myself give up. I wanted to give Lila a life where she could feel proud, safe, and happy in a place we could call our own. Finally, the day came when I had enough, and I found it, the estate on Windmere Hill. The mansion was huge, with tall white columns, wide balconies, and windows that looked over the whole valley. It felt like it had been waiting for us all along. The first person I brought there was Lila. I wanted her to see it before anyone else. We stepped out of the car together, holding hands, and I could see her eyes widen. The grass was green and perfectly trimmed, and the sunlight made the white walls shine. I felt my heart swell, and I whispered, "We did it." Lila squeezed my hand and whispered back, "We really did." We walked through the grand halls together, our footsteps echoing on the polished floors. Every room was bigger than any house we had ever worked on. The ceilings were high, the windows tall, and the air smelled faintly of fresh paint and old wood. Lila ran ahead a little, exploring the corners, pointing to the chandeliers, the wide staircase, and the huge kitchen, her laughter filling the empty rooms. I followed, smiling, feeling proud and full of joy. We imagined our life here, how we could decorate each room, and how much love and laughter would fill the space. I stopped for a moment and looked out of one of the tall windows. The valley stretched below us, golden in the afternoon sun. I thought of all the houses we had flipped, all the late nights, the hard work, the mistakes, and the small victories. Every step had led us here. Lila came up behind me, hugging my waist, and we stood together silently, letting the view sink in. That day, standing hand in hand in our new home, I felt proud and soft all at once. Our dream, the one we had imagined on scraps of paper and in our hearts, was real. We had done it together, and it was ours. The mansion on Windmere Hill was no longer just a dream. It was the beginning of our next life, full of hope, joy, and the endless possibilities we had always wanted. Years after we moved into our mansion, life felt calm and full. Lila and I were finally settling into our new rhythm when I first saw him, Caleb. He appeared out of nowhere, standing at our gate with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I just want to reconnect," he said, his voice smooth but too practiced. My stomach tightened. I had warned myself about this, and yet seeing him made something in me tense. I could feel that he wasn't here for us. Still, I let him in for a short visit, mostly for Lila's sake. It didn't stop there. Soon after, Dean's parents showed up at our doorstep. They talked about how much they missed Lila, how quiet the house felt without her around. They spoke kindly, almost too kindly, as if that could erase years of absence. I let them in too, wanting to respect their feelings, but I watched them closely. Their eyes kept darting around our home, taking in the furniture, the space, the view. I realized quickly they weren't here just to see Lila. They were measuring, judging, imagining. And then finally Dean himself appeared. He looked different, older, a little worn down, carrying the weight of his own mistakes. Divorced, broke, and somehow claiming he was ready to be a father again. He tried to smile like it was natural to just walk back into our lives. My instincts screamed no. Every warning bell in my mind shouted that he was here for the wrong reasons. I had protected Lila for so long, kept her safe from people who had shown they couldn't be trusted, and I wasn't about to let that change now. But Lila's curiosity complicated everything. She didn't understand fully why I was tense. She wanted to know why Caleb and Dean's family were here, why they suddenly seemed interested in her life again. I couldn't stop her from asking questions, and I knew I had to handle it carefully. So I allowed them to visit once, out of respect for her. I watched quietly as they interacted, noting every glance, every word, every moment that seemed rehearsed or fake. It became clear fast. Their smiles, their apologies, their sudden concern, they weren't genuine. They weren't here for love, or for connection, or for Lila's happiness. They were here for comfort, for validation, for the life we had built. They wanted what we had worked so hard for, our security, our home, our peace. I could see it in the way they looked at the house, the way they tried to charm me, and even the way they tried to charm Lila. That day, I realized I had to stay firm. I had to protect our life and our dreams, no matter what excuses they offered. Lila needed clarity, and I needed her safe. They had come crawling back, but I could see the truth. They weren't here for us. They were here for themselves. I decided to invite them all for dinner. The house was quiet as I prepared, setting the table with care. Everything looked calm, polite, and ordinary, but beneath the surface, I felt a cold certainty. Lila sat at the head of the table, smiling and unaware of the tension in the room. She didn't know what was coming, and I wanted her to feel safe while I handled the rest. They arrived one by one, trying to appear casual, friendly, even caring. Caleb was first. He leaned forward and asked for a small investment, smiling like it was harmless. I listened quietly, letting him speak, noticing the way his eyes flicked toward the table, toward me, searching for weakness. Next came Elaine. She told me about her medical bills, her worries, her struggles, begging for help in a way that sounded rehearsed, almost as if she thought sympathy would get her what she wanted. Dean arrived last, looking tired and worn, claiming he wanted his family back. His voice trembled slightly, but it didn't hide the calculation behind his words. I let them speak, letting the air thicken with their excuses and manipulations. I could feel the weight of their expectations, the way they believed I might fall for their stories. But I had learned to see through the masks. I had watched them for years, and I knew their true intentions. My mind went back to every moment, every late night, every tear Lila had shed because of their absence, their lies, their selfishness. When the last word hung in the air, I stood up. My voice was calm, steady, and controlled. I didn't shout, I didn't yell, but every word landed with precision. I laid out every betrayal I had witnessed, every insult, every night Lila cried herself to sleep, every moment they had failed her. I spoke clearly, without hesitation, without fear. My words were careful but sharp, each one cutting straight to the truth. I could see the color leave their faces, the sudden tension replacing their confident smiles. Caleb tried to interrupt, but I held my ground. Elaine looked down, her hands trembling slightly. Dean's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The room was quiet, filled only with the weight of my words and the reality they had avoided for so long. I didn't need to yell or scream. My revenge was quiet, calculated, and precise. I gave them the truth, laid bare their failures, and let them sit with it. I wanted them to understand, finally, that Lila and I were not theirs to manipulate or control. The power in that room had shifted, and I knew it. When I finished, I sat down beside Lila and smiled softly at her. She didn't need to know everything I had said, only that we were safe, that we were free, and that our life was ours alone. The dinner of truth had been served, and nothing would ever threaten us again. After that dinner, they left the mansion looking smaller than they had ever seemed. Caleb tried to spread lies about me, about us, but nobody believed him. Everyone could see the life Lila and I had built, the houses we had flipped, the business I had grown from nothing. My success spoke louder than any words he could invent. Dean's world fell apart not long after. His business went under, leaving him struggling in ways he had never known. Elaine and Victor had to leave their fancy life behind, moving into a small rental home far from the lives they had pretended to care about. Marissa vanished completely, leaving no trace, as if she had finally given up trying to matter in our story. I didn't let any of this change me. I didn't celebrate their misfortune, and I didn't dwell on anger or bitterness. Those emotions were heavy, and I had learned long ago that they could slow me down. Instead, I focused on building more, living fully, and mothering Lila with everything I had. Each day was another chance to strengthen what we had, to protect our home, and to make our lives better. The mansion became more than just a house. It became our home in every sense, filled with laughter, lessons, and love. Lila grew older, and with each passing year, she began to notice things she hadn't before. She saw how much effort I put into keeping us safe, how I stayed calm when others tried to hurt us, and how I turned every challenge into a chance to move forward. She began to understand that my strength didn't come from fighting back with anger. It came from survival, from the quiet determination to protect her and build a better life. One afternoon, as we were arranging some new furniture in the living room, Lila looked at me and smiled. "You made our castle, Mommy," she said softly, her eyes bright with admiration. Brick by brick. I felt a rush of pride and love that went deeper than words. Every sacrifice, every late night, every moment I had spent learning, working, and protecting us had been for this. The life we had built was real, solid, and ours. I hugged her tightly and told her she was the heart of our castle, that everything we had done had been for both of us. She beamed, and in that moment, I realized that the battles, the hardships, and even the pain had all shaped our life in the best way possible. We had made something permanent, something strong, something filled with love. Life went on quietly after that. I kept flipping houses, growing the business, and enjoying the simple joys of our home. Lila learned from every step I took, and I watched her grow into a girl who understood that strength was not loud or violent. It was steady, patient, and unshakable. Our castle stood firm, built not on anger or revenge, but on survival, love, and the steady work of our hands and hearts. The morning light was soft and golden as I stepped onto the balcony. The mansion was quiet, resting in the calm of dawn. The air was cool, and a light mist drifted across the hills below. Lila joined me, still sleepy, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. We stood side by side, watching the sun rise slowly over the valley. The world looked peaceful, almost new. I took a deep breath and felt the weight of everything we had lived through begin to fade. The struggles, the pain, the long nights of worry. They all felt distant now, like shadows that no longer mattered. What was left was this moment. The quiet, the warmth of my daughter beside me, and the life we had built together. I looked down at her and smiled. "We did this together," I whispered. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with pride, and smiled back. She slipped her small hand into mine and held it tightly. For a while we said nothing. We didn't need words. The peace around us said it all. The mansion stood strong behind us, every room filled with memories of our journey. Each wall, each corner, each step held a story of how we had gotten here. It wasn't revenge that brought me peace. It was this. Success that didn't need to prove anything. A life that was whole, steady, and full of love. As I looked out at the hills, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayals, the losses, the times I felt broken. Each moment, painful as it was, had built something inside me. I had learned to be strong without bitterness, to rebuild without hate. Every person who had tried to tear me down had only pushed me closer to who I was meant to become. Lila leaned her head against my arm, and I realized that every decision, every struggle, had led to this view, to this sunrise, to this peace. She was growing, learning, becoming her own person, and I knew she would carry our story with her. The light spread wider across the valley, touching the trees, the roofs, the winding roads below. It felt like the world was opening up again, full of new beginnings. I felt calm, knowing that we were ready for whatever came next. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was proof that we had survived, that we had turned pain into something beautiful. I looked at Lila one last time, feeling a deep love that filled every part of me. My voice was soft when I spoke, but the words carried all the truth of our journey. "They left me with nothing," I said, watching the sun rise higher, "but they also left me with the only thing that mattered, her."